Mute. I can unmute. I don't hear anything.
I'm not hearing anything yet either.
Now, I don't think that we're on yet. They know we're here, but they just broke up for the previous.
I can't hear anybody.
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
I can hear y'all.
This is the usual thing. It
Can
takes them a
anybody
while to
hear
get
me?
online. Yes,
Okay.
this is the usual thing, okay? It takes a while for them to get on and start the meeting, so it'll be delayed, but they'll get on here shortly and start up. It's usually 5 to 7 minutes late.
Guys,
It's all good.
it's a game.
Yeah.
Right. Everyone's there.
That's right.
These are short. Who's better than Charlotte? Like they're
That's true.
all right, guys, let's go get started.
Oh, I'm listening to it now.
Call this meeting to order.
I know. She was gonna leave me hanging.
Mayor, let's go.
How are you?
All right.
Mayor.
I didn't call. Hear myself.
Somebody's computers.
Okay. Let's call the May 28th meeting of the Class 4 Delegates order. Still hear myself. Thank you guys so much for being here. And for everyone online, thank you guys so much for being here as well and taking your time with us. Your delegates duty with us. As a reminder, online. Okay, if you guys online can mute, hear the echo. Maybe Miss Laney.
Yes.
I think we're hearing your echo.
Really? Okay. I'm gonna mute.
Okay. So thank you guys so much for being here. As a reminder, this meeting is being live streamed.
Seems like you just went on mute after you said live stream.
And I believe Elena will be the one to call roll each time a vote is needed. So Elena, would you call the roll?
I will. Thank you. Hopefully folks can hear me. So I'm going to start the top delegate. You can say here and then alternate as well.
Aberdeen, Wilma Laney present.
Anger,
Chevelle Harmon, delegate present.
Apex,
Yes, present.
Archer Lodge, Benson. Broadway. Cameron. Carborough. David O'Donnell. Carthage. Carey. Chapel Hill.
Michael Parker here.
Chatham County.
Amanda Robertson, present.
Katie Kenlin, present.
Clayton. Durham.
City of Durham.
Did you say Durham County?
I was about to.
Michelle Burton, Durham County, present.
Thank you. Foxfire. Yuke Verena. Garner. Goldston. Hillsborough.
Kathleen Ferguson, Hillsborough, here.
Holly Spring.
Here's Holly Springs here.
Johnson County. Kenley. Nightdale. Lee County.
Lee County, Kirk here.
Micro.
Katie Garcia, Town of Micro, present.
Moore County. Morrisville. Orange County.
Gene Hamilton, Orange County, present.
Pellegrino. Pine Level. Pine Bluff. Pinehurst.
Pinehurst, Jeff Morgan, present.
Pittsboro. Princeton.
Stacy Johnson, Town of Princeton, here.
Raleigh.
Mitchell Silver, City of Raleigh, present.
Robbins. Roseville. Stanford. Selman here. Selma.
McAllister here.
Tyler City. Smithfield. Southern Pine. Taylortown. Bass. Wade County.
Susan Evans, present. What county?
Wake Forest. Rendell. Whispering Pine.
Hutchinson.
Wilson Mills. And Zebulon. Is there anyone that I missed?
Yes, Matt Hughes, Commissioner, Town of Hillsborough, present.
Thank you very much.
Thomas Beal, Commissioner in Broadway.
Thank you. We have quorum.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you guys for being here. It's a pretty great crowd for board delegates meeting, so I appreciate that. Next section is a get to know CPRC section that I've included to make sure we know our history and where we're coming from and where we're going to. So I'm going to read this. This is from the minutes of the November 20th, 1980 Triangle J Council Board of Delegates meeting. In that meeting, the council received a report entitled "The Economic Analysis TJ," which was written by Lee Capps, the TJ Coggs project director for economic development, and James A. Street, an economist with the Research Triangle Institute. The report revealed that the population in Region J was growing at more than twice the national and state rates, and approximately 1.5 times the 14-state Sunbelt region.
Can't hear anymore.
I think you guys went on mute again.
I can hear y'all, but I can't hear the room.
Yes, we can't hear the room, guys.
Well, what that means is the room has stopped transmitting. So they're either on mute or they have some sort of failure in their system. I doubt they've completely failed because we're still on the call. That means the call has to still be present. So it'll take them a couple minutes to figure this out. If someone's got access to the chat, I would recommend you type in there.
Yep.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
All right, so we're good. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. We're having some technical difficulties, but we're about to get going again. So I'm not sure where it cut off. 1990? Is that it?
1990.
Okay. I'm gonna go back to where I think it was. We're talking about growth rate in 1990 was expected to continue. Okay. This is okay. This is okay. I'm gonna keep it going. So the year-long comprehensive economic study looks at trends in the 6-county region of TJ Cog. According to the study, 50% of our region's total growth from 1960 to 1978 was due to new people moving into the area. By 1990, the population in our region is expected to total 763,000 people, a 22% increase from 1978. The study also discloses that 52% of a population is employed, a high percentage when compared to 43% of the nation and 46% of the state. Actually, this means that our region has a tight labor market. Any new business that wanting to locate here must either bring its own labor force or provide extensive job training. From 1970 to 1978, employment growth of the rural counties of Chatham, Johnston, and Lee came in the form of manufacturing. The largest share of Wake and Orange counties' employment growth came in the government sector, including state government and the universities. Durham County's employment growth was due primarily to a surge in service industries. So a little time stamp of 1980. I think a lot of the issues with growth that they were seeing then are continuing today. I would say maybe the The rural areas have changed probably the most of any of that during that time. So thank you guys so much for listening. Okay, so the agenda has been provided to you guys beforehand, and just as a review, we have a presentation from the Keenan Institute from Cody Morris. We have a program spotlight on the World Elder Abuse awareness. There's a business item about the budget for fiscal year 25-26, and then we have the nominating committee for officers for next year. Do I have any changes to the agenda as presented? Okay, hearing none, we'll approve that and continue. So, Cody Morris, I'd like to invite you to the front. Thank you so much for being here. Cody Morris is the Senior Economic Research Analyst with the Keenan Institute of Private Enterprise, talking about an economic briefing and regional economic analysis. Cody, take it away.
All right, so I'm Cody Morris. I work at the Keenan Institute of Private Enterprise, attached to the Keenan Business School at UNC. We're a nonpartisan think tank, specialized in economic research, and we also have a boots on the ground wing called NC Growth. Works a lot with smaller firms and towns and cities, things like that, on very specific projects. Just a little bit about me. My family is originally from Alamance County. I live in Greensboro. I am looking like I'm about to finish my PhD in economics at UNCG. I'm waiting on my committee. That's why I say about. Been at Keenan Institute for 2.5 years now. Senior economic research analyst, so I do a lot of data work. Write. I recently wrote a report called From Tobacco to High Tech. It's about the kind of a history of North Carolina manufacturing industries, focusing on the Piedmont Triad and Research Triangle specifically. So I've come to talk about kind of a snapshot, the economic landscape, a little bit about the US right now, North Carolina, how it fits in, and then the Research Triangle specifically. And I can get into each one of those definitions, or the definition of what we call the Research Triangle at UNC. So at the Keenan Institute, about 3 years ago, we started a new project called the American Growth Project. All right. So what this does is it looks at regional economies across the U.S. One of the drivers of the thought around this was the idea that we in North Carolina have 2 regional economies, 3, but 2 of them with names that aren't just Charlotte area. We have the Piedmont Triad and Western Central, centered around Winston-Salem, Greensboro, and High Point, and then we have the Research Triangle, centered around the big 3 universities, Chapel Hill and Durham and NC State and Raleigh. So why we chose these types of regions. We wanted to look at something that was sub-US. There's not a lot of data and research done in the US at regional level. There's some at the States, not much below that. In Europe, they have a lot of data and they do a lot of research at the small regional level. So states and like census regions like this, a bit too broad. Counties have their own difficulties. There's data so granular, it's hard to find. It's hard to find where it's not super lagged by several years. So we landed on metropolitan areas effectively. And the reasons why is, again, the examples of the Research Triangle, which is actually 2 separate MSAs, metro areas. There's Durham and Chapel Hill and Raleigh Cary, 2 metro areas. And then the same for the Piedmont Triad. It's actually 2 separate. It's Winston-Salem MSA and then the Greensboro MSA that also. So together, those are called CSAs. So effectively, we took these combined statistical areas, which are just larger metro areas. We took the top 150 of those and any MSAs, metro areas that are not CSAs. This is important because this includes places like Wilmington, North Carolina, Austin, Texas, San Diego, California. These places aren't in these larger regions, they have smaller regions. So we focus on top 150 by population. This gets us here. So covers, we have presence in 46 states. It's about 1/3 of the US counties, right, are in these 150 regions, but it includes 87% of US GDP, 85% of employment, and 84% of population live in just 1,200 of the 3,200 counties in the US. And this is a chart showing a 10-year GDP growth rate from the last 10 years annualized. So you can see Research Triangles, this dark green spot. It's had a good run the past 30 years, especially. North Carolina is a very interesting place for this type of research because we have such regionalized economies. We have the Charlotte area, it's heavy on financial sector, business services. We have Piedmont Triad, which is still one of the heaviest manufacturing regions in the US for its size. And then we have the Research Triangle, which is actually an interesting story. It's what you would think of as research, right? It does have a very strong scientific and technical services sector, which includes R&D, engineering, accounting, all of the high and productive services. But it also has a very, very productive manufacturing industry. All right, so I'm going to quickly kind of go over kind of the current US conditions right now, right? As far as the data, what the data shows. Right. So this is a chart, this is from our employment briefings at Keene Institute, first Friday of every month, unless it is the first day of the month. The Bureau of Labor Statistics releases a new updated employment report with the latest data from the month before. Right? And we track this and we have an employment briefing 30 minutes later that's open to the public, and one of our economists, one of our professors from Keene Flagler, kind of lead the briefing, kind of talk about what the numbers mean, and we'll kind of give their take on the economy right now. So this is just showing payroll changes. So this is employment growth. Every month, each one of these bars is the amount of new jobs added, according to BLS, and the orange line is just like a 3-month average to kind of smooth it out. But since COVID, right, jobs have rebounded and they've steadily grown. Right, the last month it was, I think, 177,000 jobs, new jobs were added in the U.S. Job growth has been robust, it's been steady. We've had lower months, but for the most part, it's steady at the U.S. level. GDP has actually been very strong. The U.S. economy has been has come out of COVID very strong and has been kind of the envy of the world. All right, no other economy has really been as robust and as strong. Everyone's experienced more sluggish growth, stagnated employment growth. Now, you see that dip. This is the latest quarter. This is the first quarter of 2025. It actually shows negative growth. And what that is all right, there you go. So what this is showing here is this the breakdown of what contributes to GDP and to its individual parts. So this is overall. So we had a slight negative growth through the economy in the U.S. in the first quarter of 2020. This is consumer spending. It added to the economy. Investment, government had a little bit less. That's net taxes, exports a little bit, and then you see imports. Imports skyrocketed to and reduced the GDP. This is based off the GDP formula. Imports are net negative on GDP growth. It reduced it by 5 percentage points. So in a regular regular imports are much lower during a regular quarter. So it would have been here. So it dropped the GDP growth by over 5 percentage points alone. And this was a race to beat the tariffs. People were afraid of the tariffs, and they just started ordering. Companies started ordering, trying to get stock in, and just kind of build up their stock at that lower price before tariffs potentially came. This chart, blue line showing hourly earnings, the growth in hourly earnings, so wages, and the orange line is inflation. So since 2023, earnings have outpaced inflation. The growth in earnings have outpaced inflation. So inflation is continuing to go down. Is the CPI, and hourly earnings are still growing, and they're growing at a higher rate than they were pre-pandemic. And inflation is still a little bit high compared to what it was pre-pandemic, but it's like 2.3 or something right now, which is pretty good. All right, so I'm going to talk about North Carolina and the Research Triangle. All right, so North Carolina, this is kind of a very quick snapshot. It's Q4 in 2024. At the end of the year, the economy grew by about 3.3%, which is strong. Employment growth was kind of low at 0.32%. And in the last 10 years, population of North Carolina has grown by almost 12%. It's a lot. It's one of the fastest growing states in the U.S., especially since COVID. A lot of, I think, outside of Texas and Florida, California, North Carolina was the #1 destination for people moving. Right. So this is a breakdown of the main sector, right? In the economy, so we have about 5 million workers, and that's 3.2% of the U.S. economy, and then $857 billion worth of GDP. So it's almost 3% of the U.S. GDP comes from North Carolina. Manufacturing, this is the one I'm stressing manufacturing because I'll talk a bit more about it once we get to Research Triangle. But it employs just shy of 500,000 people in North Carolina. It's about 9.3% of our workforce. And then science and technical services. So this is about 7% of our workforce. So once the economy in North Carolina was really based on manufacturing, like much of the U.S., but it was based on textiles, tobacco, furniture. Right? Late 1950s and then established in the 1960s, Research Triangle. Right? This was a big game changer, not only for the Research Triangle, but also North Carolina. One of its first big fish it landed was IBM. Right? And since then, it's only grown. And it's turned, if you look at charts of Piedmont Triad versus Research Triangle, Piedmont Triad used to have a larger economy, more employees, a larger population than the Research Triangle. That all changed around 2003, starting in the 80s and then into the 90s. Research Triangle just takes off, right? And then in 2006-ish, you see productivity, and I'll show that, really jumps up in the Research Triangle. But North Carolina, like I mentioned, has a very relatively advanced economy now. We have a robust banking industry, kind of centered in Charlotte, the headquarters of Bank of America. Research Triangle is a hub for biotech, probably the largest, if not one of the largest biotech hubs in North Carolina, in the U.S., both research and manufacturing. We have we have a growing aerospace manufacturing industry across North Carolina. There's Boom Supersonic just opened up, just finished their factory in Greensboro, and they're planning on start shipping planes out in a couple of years. Honda Jets are already there. GE Aerospace is in Asheville and here in Durham. Toyota, the largest industrial investment in North Carolina history, has started to produce batteries in Liberty and Randolph County. It's a big change from textiles and tobacco. Tobacco's still here. Reynolds is still in Winston-Salem. Textiles are still here. Textiles that are pretty much left are either high-end or advanced. So one example is Glen Raven Mills in Burlington, where I'm from. They are part of Sunbrella. They make the UV resistant fabrics for umbrellas and patio coverings, things like that. So it's very regional. So here are 8 what we call extended metro areas. Right? Research Triangle Park's there. Research Triangle is there in the middle in the green. Right? Our definition of Research Triangle is based off the census CSA, but it's Wake, Durham, Orange, Johnson County, Chatham, but it also includes Vance, Person, Granville, and Franklin. So it kind of goes north here, where doesn't include Lee or Moore. Lee and Moore is actually a part of our FAVE. But these are actually set to change a little bit in the new year because we're going to update our forecast now. All right, so here's the Research Triangle, and actually all of the EMAs in North Carolina. So you can see in the past 5 years, the Research Triangle's GDP. This is with our forecast for this year is grown will be 4.8%, which is the 7th fastest growing economy in the U.S. 3rd fastest as far as large economies. We separate our analysis into the largest 50 and then the mid-sized 100. So like Wilmington, Rocky Mount, Fayetteville, Asheville, those are kind of the mid-size. Where Greensboro, Charlotte, and Raleigh or Research Triangle, those are in the top 50. But you see, it's just across the board. It's high growth. Population growth is annualized, so it's 2%. It's 27% of North Carolina's economy. It's Research Triangle, 21% of its population. Charlotte, which has always been large, is still growing. Charlotte's not, it's not like they're going away. This just shows the performance of the Research Triangle has just exploded in the past few years. Charlotte's still one of the healthiest growing economies. It's still large. It's over 1/3 of North Carolina's economy and almost 1/3 of its population in the Charlotte area. You can see this far exceeds the U.S. average growth in the same time period is 3.2%. So quite a bit larger. And Wilmington is actually really fast growing. Right? We've been to New Hanover County and met with their county commissioners about a similar project, but it's about the North Carolina counties. And they have the issues of keeping up with the growth. They're worried about their infrastructure and water management, everything like that, because it's grown so much since COVID. This is where I'd like to focus on manufacturing in the Research Triangle. So Research Triangle's success is kind of based on its big 3 universities, but all of its universities in the area. Research Triangle Park was established on leveraging the research being performed at the big 3 universities. And that's where we get RTP. We have companies like SAS or spinoffs from students. SAS was, I think, founded by state PhD students way back. 14 national basketball championships between these 3 universities. Right? So it's important. If you look here, it's hard to see this visual, but this is comparing the amount of employment, the share of employment in manufacturing in the Research Triangle versus the United States share, and then its GDP that comes from that. So Research Triangle, 14% of its GDP, its economy, comes from 6% of its labor force in manufacturing. Where in the US, it's about 10% of GDP comes from 8%. of its labor force. So it's very productive. You can see that here. This is a chart showing the manufacturing productivity for Research Triangle in green, and the Triad in red, and then the Charlotte area in blue. And it just explodes, right? It's the 7th most productive manufacturing sector in the US of all 150. And if you exclude any of them, that are really dependent on oil refinery, it's the 2nd most behind San Francisco. All right. All the other ones that are more productive are like Amarillo and New Orleans and all these places that have a lot of oil refinery. And it's very productive as far as dollars out per employee. And this is driven by, just a chunk of this is biotech. This is biotech manufacturing. RTP and the triangle general, yes.
The question here was,
Yes. Are we 7th most productive for advanced manufacturing or all manufacturing?
This is all manufacturing. Right. It's being driven by the advanced manufacturing, such as especially biotech, but it also includes things like GE Aerospace and the other, traditional, heavy manufacturing. This includes Chatham County. So if VinFast ever does, finish their factory, then that would be included in this as well. So it's extremely productive. And it's not just the manufacturing sector, but also the research, the scientific and technical services sector is also one of the more productive ones in the U.S. as well. So just briefly, is kind of like what to keep an eye on, right? Coming or potentially come. And it's probably no surprise, but economic uncertainty, economic policy uncertainty is very high. So this kind of measures using media, measures newspaper mentions and stuff about the economy and uncertainty and things like that. And it's an all-time high right now. Research Triangle's pretty susceptible to what's going on right now. So just focusing on NIH research funding cuts, right? So just between the big 3 universities, it's about $200 million worth of research funding that has been cut. And that has economic implications because research shows that about for every $1 of research funding from the NIH, it's about 2.5 times that of economic activity is produced. It also, from this, direct job losses so far is estimated to be about 4,200 jobs in the Research Triangle. And that doesn't include indirect jobs and things like that from the people losing their jobs and not spending. Yes.
This chart, it looks like it goes back to 1985. Do you have statistics going back before 85, or is that when you really started collecting this? I'm just curious.
I think that's when it started.
This level of uncertainty in United States history.
Yeah. So it's probably not true with the Great Depression and everything, and Black Friday and 20s. But I believe that's when this started. Because what this is an index built on the collection of media and the mentions. So it requires some computer work to produce, or it would be a ton of legwork to do that. So federal job cuts in North Carolina, it's about 51,000 federal civilian employees, right? And 23,000 of these are in the Triangle. So if that's about 2% of the workforce here. And so that includes things like, well, the EPA was at RTP.
To live.
Yeah, those types of jobs, they're high paying, highly productive as far as research jobs go. It's pretty susceptible to those cuts.
Great question. Is this just U.S. or just North Carolina? Economic uncertainty.
This is U.S. This is all of U.S. Yep. So tariffs. So one of the main things causing the uncertainty, right? This chart changes constantly because the tariffs are changing constantly. A couple of weeks ago, this is us now, 12.1%. This was at 25.6. So it's much more stark then. But these are the effective average U.S. tariff. So we're at levels we haven't seen since the 40s, right? And there's a couple aspects from this. The constant changing, right, of tariffs. It's one thing to announce tariffs and stick with them, but the constant changing, businesses, individuals, they can't plan well, right? You don't know whether or not to expand or not, or to lower your orders, or to order now versus later. You don't know what to expect, right? Also, this shut prices. Right now, they haven't yet, or it hasn't come out with the data. Another thing is with the tariffs and the potential prices, this is the federal funds rate. This is the rate that the Fed changes when they want to lower and raise short-term interest rates. Right now, it's like 4.25%. This starts in the 90s, but if you go back further, it's pretty low relatively, but it's very high compared to what we experienced after the financial crisis, which was near zero. Because of this and quantitative easing, which quantitative easing is just a strategy the Fed uses. They buy long-term bonds to drive down the yield, right? The higher demand for a bond, the lower the yield. So they can't change the direct interest rate for long-term bonds, like treasuries, directly like they can short-term with the federal funds rate. So what they do is they buy long-term bonds, massive quantities that no individual person, and they drive down interest rates for long-term treasury bonds, 10-year treasuries specifically. And what this did, this is why we had super low mortgage rates for so long. And we started quantitative tightening, which is the opposite, where they sell these bonds right before the pandemic, and then especially in the pandemic to drive up rates because they were trying to cool off the inflation, per se. Right? So the worry is they paused the cuts. You can see where they started to make the cuts. They made a couple of cuts, and they paused them because they're uncertain what's going to happen. If tariffs are high, that will drive prices up. Right? And they will be stuck in the middle because the U.S. Federal Reserve has a dual mandate. It's to try to maximize employment, but also control inflation, which traditionally in economics, those are trade-offs, right? Usually inflation's high, that's usually because the economy is running hot, right? And if inflation's low, there's slack in the economy. So usually you attack 10 to 1 at the sake of the other. Then there's a situation that we had in the 70s and that they're worried about if we have high inflation. Now, which is stagflation, it's where you have high inflation and the economy slows down and shrinks. That Paul Volcker, the Fed, and the 80s, he addressed that by causing U.S. to go into a pretty severe recession for quite a while until the inflation dropped. So that's what Jerome Powell and them are watching, is the inflation, because they'll be kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place when it comes to tariffs. So here's municipal bond yields. So this is the spread. This is the difference between the municipal bond yields and the medium-term treasuries. So it's like 7-year treasury rates. You can see during recessions, that's the shaded area, the difference goes up, right? Because normally during normal times you have either flat or negative relationship. So this is the municipal bond yield minus U.S. Treasury yield. You see U.S. Treasury yields go down during times of stress because they are traditionally seen as safe havens, right? people, businesses, governments, they flock to the US Treasuries because they're very liquid and they are one of the safest investments you can make. You're pretty much guaranteed to get your money back. So what we see is, so negative is normal, right? Municipal bonds, there's tax benefits and stuff. So the rates aren't as high as treasury yields usually. But during times of stress, you see that flip. To goes into infrastructure costs and everything like that. So they've been really low, but the spread has picked up some, meaning that treasury yields have gone down relative to the municipal. So just some very kind of basic recommendations potentially, right?
Do you feel like you've lost this? Because I'm like, I appreciate you so much, but also, wow. So I'm sorry. I just,
feel free to ask any question.
incredible. I don't even know what to ask.
So basically what there is right now is a lot of uncertainty. And uncertainty just means you don't know what's going to happen, right? Like the economy, all the numbers, but people are worried about what could be, right? And so community engagement, just basically essentially figuring out what people are worried about, what they're experiencing, you know, maintain fiscal balance. If you're overextended fiscally, obviously, and the economy shrinks, you know, then it's difficult. The issue is though, that if you do pull back, do cut spending at all, that can actually make the downturn worse. And then economic data infrastructure. So this is mainly just to advocation. So just to advocate for better data collection and availability, whether it be from state or federal representatives. So improved data, more frequent and diverse types of data help policymakers and businesses make better decisions. Does anybody have any questions?
I had a question. I've struggled with the uncertainty of from Apex, and we want to build stuff in Apex because we're growing really fast, like roads or facilities or parks, whatever it is. And things have gotten more expensive, and the land's gotten more expensive. And I've wondered, like, is this a time to invest when we really need to have this growth in these facilities, or is it better just to wait and hope that things get better and cheaper? And I don't really know the answer. I think we mostly just kept buying stuff and kept building stuff. Well, I don't know. I mean, I know we know the future, but I wish that we had land banked when things were cheaper, and now I'm like, this is the bad time to be doing it, and I don't know the answer.
So for thinking about funding projects and long-term investments, that requires, you know, bonds usually or something like that, right? So interest rates right now are still historically relatively low. The issue right now is what we're experiencing as the relative, like, extreme, you know, once in a lifetime lows of the 12 years that followed financial crisis. Money was cheap. And so you see this in the housing market, right? You have lots of people who have golden handcuffs. They have these extremely low mortgage rates, like 2% or 3%, right? And they're in their first homes, or maybe they're retiring and they want to downsize, right? But now not only are housing prices way up, you also have mortgage rates are, you know, double what they were before. And so people are keeping their starter homes. People are not downsizing from their other homes because it's going to cost just as much, if not more, for the smaller home now. So it's hard to say. Right? Personally, I'd love to see mortgage rates go back down. I would like to refinance. Right after it skyrocketed. it's hard to know what's coming. Right now, a lot's being managed. Specifically, a lot of this uncertainty is coming from the executive branch right now. Right? I think tariffs are on and off, extremely high rates, and federal job cuts and grant cuts. Like Greensboro specifically had offices from the USDA researchers that help farmers and stuff that closed. So it's kind of a wait and see. A lot of so our forecasts were put to bed at the beginning of January, and we factored in some potential drags by policy. Turns out we were in the right direction, but not enough. Right? So most of the forecasters now have downgraded all their forecasts for the U.S. And it still looks positive. It's positive growth. Some people have recessions coming soon. Some have just mild. But it all depends, on policies. And
I have to separate your presentation into personal and municipal, because on a personal level, I'm sitting here thinking the lower buy, everything's going to get more expensive. So buy now, save up as much as you buy now. But on a municipal level, we can't do that. I don't have that opportunity. And unfortunately, things move so slow for us in the government. Only in Holly Springs. I know everyone else does everything fast. But I'll give you an example. We had to invest for water improvements, and previous council had set money aside, and we get a call. Well, we have a meeting that says, these prices are going up thanks to tariffs, thanks to the prices of steel, and they're not going back down. So the prices of some of these projects increase. I think what's the struggle for us is, how do we make sure that we get these things done without raising taxes? What are we cutting? What are we doing to make sure that we can get them done? Because we're growing, we still have to have clean, drinkable water. And on the same side, everyone complains about, a lot of people talk about roads and infrastructure, and we set money aside, but it takes 6 years, 8 years to build something. So at the same time, everything is going. And as we're watching all of this, it's very difficult to try to predict how at a municipal level.
Yes, it's hard to predict. I know in Guilford County Schools, they passed, there was a bond that passed a couple of years ago, and they had all these things they were trying to build. And now, as a couple of years down the line, they're having to cut things from the bottom of the list between inflation and increased costs. Now they're having to pivot to changing schools from their original purpose to new purposes. Was going to be a magnet school, now it's a neighborhood school. That's the hard part. Money most likely won't be cheap again. Outside of, it was cheap because there was a financial crisis. That was what caused all the strange movements, after 2010 and later, right? People are afraid to, businesses, although money was cheap, businesses still weren't spending. You would think. It took 5 or 6 years to get to kind of where everything was prior, and then it was slow, and then it picked up right before COVID, and then obviously COVID came and threw a whole different wrench into everything. So the 12 years after the financial crisis, there was just such an anomaly as far as interest rates being met, and it was driven by the Fed. The Fed dropped the federal funds rate, so the short-term rates down near zero. They were also buying so much massive quantities of these long-term bonds that it was driving those yields down too. To incentivize investments and buying of houses and things like that. But with the inflation during COVID, they had to then pick up the rates quick. it took maybe a bit too long to do that, to head off the inflation. But it's hard to see those super low rates coming back. Essentially, it would require some type of crisis or recession that the Fed would have to act in response to try, because only the Fed really has the power to buy treasury bonds. And we've seen a little bit with this uncertainty with the U.S. government's fiscal position. We're starting to see other countries who typically use the U.S. treasuries, right, as a safe haven or investment, right? So if we import things that sends dollars abroad, but then they have dollars that they can't necessarily use there. So they then invest in the U.S., whether it's investing in businesses or buying U.S. treasuries, which that demand for the U.S. treasuries drives down the rates. So if they are no longer as interested in keeping their money in treasuries, then rates on average you would see climb. And that's what we've seen recently, is that with the uncertainty and the scares, the long-term rates haven't gone down like we would expect. So some of the relationships are kind of maybe breaking that we've traditionally had. But we're at an inflection point of what might happen. So we might return somewhat to normal, or it could change. Yeah.
Do we have any questions online before we close this out?
No, not a question. I have an observation, Cody. A few weeks back, I had Richard Moxley, which is Senator Budd's field representative, and we visited two industries in Lee County. One of them was Hydrotube, and Hydrotube forms steel, and they do most of John Deere's work. And when we were discussing tariffs with him, the owner was basically upbeat, and he says, I can handle it. It's not an issue. Then we go to Barat Forge, which is aluminum forging of control arms for front vehicles. And he was very disappointed because, one, I think he was counting on the contract with VinFast, and that hasn't panned out. And so he was a little distraught with tariffs. So it was two different viewpoints on tariffs within our county. So it was an interesting perspective.
Tariffs can create winners and losers, right? The largest steel manufacturer in the U.S. is based in Charlotte, Nucor. They have several mills in North Carolina. I think they have one that they're expanding in Davidson County. And if there's a steel tariff, price of steel goes up, and they win, from that, right? They make more money. They may hire more people or expand production. But what happens though is everything downstream now is affected from that. So all the jobs that use steel, whether or not it was coming from the US or abroad, it's now more expensive to create. It's more expensive to manufacture the cars or the pipes or the like, whatever steel is being used, and that can have ramifications. I think it was the washing machine tariffs in 2018. Research shows that it costs like $820 something thousand per job that was added as far as the taxes that were collected. So it would have just been less expensive to just directly subsidize those jobs, in hindsight, than to have a tariff, right? There's downstream ramifications, both in the manufacturing sector, but also in the service sectors that use any machines or anything. Like those machines are now more expensive because they're more expensive to make, and so that's higher cost. So it creates winners and losers. There are times and places for tariffs. There's an idea of what's called the infant industry. So Korea in the 60s wanted to build cars. They wanted to become a car manufacturer. And So they created trade barriers for cars, and the cars that they did make, they weren't nice. They weren't, but they forced South Koreans to pay the higher prices for the worst cars, and eventually it worked out, right? We had Kia and Hyundai, and it worked out for them. But I think it was Malaysia tried to do the same thing, and they have trade barriers that prevent or make it very expensive to buy cars that aren't made there, and they still don't really have international car manufacturing industry. So it's it's kind of a give with one hand and take with the other as far as tariffs.
One more, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so Cody, thank you for this presentation. How do you guess that the global response to the dollar is going to affect these different nodes in North Carolina and of course RTP in particular?
So as far as just the strength of the dollar, right? If the currency becomes relatively weaker, it makes the products more attractive because they're less expensive, right? So if the dollar becomes weaker compared to the euro, then holding everything else constant, like U.S. exports are now relatively cheaper for Europeans to buy. So in North Carolina, it's difficult to say because on one hand we have tariffs that would drive up prices, things that are manufactured, thus making them more expensive for people to export. I would say holding everything else, balancing everything else is probably more expensive to export, even if the dollar weakens, it would have to weaken a lot, for it to counterbalance that. So places like Greensboro, Rocky Mount, Hickory, I didn't talk about it much, but Hickory, I think, has first or second highest share of its economy in manufacturing as far as employment. It's like 30-something% of Hickory area's economy works in manufacturing. They still have furniture manufacturing there, but they also have biotech. And so places with high shares of traditional manufacturing probably, I don't know how pharmaceuticals and biotech manufacturing would be hit necessarily. I know that just the Durham export port in place of origin is something like $280 billion or something. Probably a lot of pharmaceuticals and biotech and the gene therapies and everything else being made here. I don't know how that would be hit. If Europe puts a reciprocal tariff, right? We can talk all day about our tariffs that we apply, which do have negative effects on us, right? But then there's the other side putting tariffs on us, just like with China, right? So our tariffs could do nothing to raise the prices directly of pharmaceuticals, but if Europe or whoever imports a lot of our pharmaceuticals wants to retaliate, I don't know the shares of as far as the shares of our exports that are pharmaceuticals or biotech based. Interesting to look at.
On that note, please join me in thanking Cody for being here today. Very helpful, I think, for us planning for the future. Yeah. Okay. Next, we have a CPRC program / service spotlight, World Elder Abuse Awareness. That is being presented by Janisha and others. Oh, you're presenting it. You're introducing. Sorry, Janisha, go ahead. Go ahead. Okay.
Do you have the clicker? Oh, yeah, it's perfect. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
My name's Autumn Cox. I'm one of the 5 regional ombudsmen that we have here at Central Pines. And
I'm Janisha Hennick, and I'm the director at Central Pines Area Agency on Aging.
so I said one of the 5. You can see each of our names outlined here. We have Tracy Burton, myself, Carolyn Pennington, who's actually here tonight, Charlene Perquette. She actually is brand new. She started with us last Monday, and then Angela Woodard. All right, so we're going to talk tonight just briefly with you guys about the role of the ombudsman, and then we'll get into World Elder Abuse Awareness. So what is an ombudsman? We serve as advocates for residents who live in long-term care homes. This could look like a skilled nursing facility, an assisted living home, or a family care home. We are mandated under the Older Americans Act, so that's important to note. We work towards helping resolve complaints, concerns that residents and or their families have. We educate residents on their rights, and we also educate staff. So we do staff in services, sharing information about residents' rights, elder abuse, sensitivity to aging. We do all of that in the facilities with staff. We also provide guidance for people about their long-term care options. So often we get calls from people, usually whenever they're in crisis mode, saying, hey, this is the situation. We've got to put mom or dad, somewhere. What does that look like? We can't tell them to pick this facility over that facility, but we do provide guidance and help them make educated decisions based on resources that we have. We also work with other regulatory offices, and it's all based on if the resident has given us consent. So confidentiality is the backbone of our program. And so everything that we do, we have to get consent from the resident to act on that. So that's either getting consent from them to work the complaint in the facility or to get regulatory involved, and that would be the state. You have anything else you want to add about the role? Okay. Also, just wanted to note, this is a picture. This is Carolyn, who's also here tonight. This is our friend Peggy, and so we'll hear from Peggy in just a minute. I'm pointing to the TV. I need to point to the computer. Maybe not. Okay. All right. So every year from Mother's Day to Father's Day, they recognize World Elder Abuse Awareness month, time frame, etc. But specifically June 15th. June 15th is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And so one of the residents' rights is that all residents have the right to be free from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So just wanted to note that. It's estimated that 1 in 10 older adults are abused, but only 1 in 5 actually get reported. Okay. North Carolina is a mandatory reporting state. And so each of us are charged, and I'm looking at you guys. So everyone is charged with reporting. So it's not our job to know if the abuse actually happened. It's your job to report it. Okay. And so you would report that to Adult Protective Services. And APS is housed at our county DSS, Department of Social Services. One other thing to note, our program specifically, the Ombudsman program, we do not investigate abuse allegations. We do work closely with the adult if they choose to allow us in. For example, today, just before this meeting, I was at a facility. It was an abuse situation. The family called APS, but they also wanted me to still be involved because mom was still in the building, and we were working on what that looks like moving forward. So that they could work towards regaining that trust, building that rapport back. So just because they've called APS doesn't mean that we're not involved. Went too far.
Sorry, I was trying to help you.
You're good. No worries. So now I'm going to talk briefly about the types of abuse. So obviously, whenever we think about abuse, where does our mind go? Physical abuse, right? Hitting, kicking, punching, spitting, all of that falls under physical abuse, okay? Then you have mental abuse, and that can be, verbally abusing someone, with the intention of humiliating that person, or causing them some kind of like distress, intimidation, where they fear fear or shame. Verbal abuse, like I said, is also under the mental abuse aspect. Then you also have sexual abuse. It's important to note that this can be resident to resident, it can be resident to staff, and it can also be staff to resident. So there's 3 different ways that that could play out. Next, I just want to hit on neglect. So neglect is the failure to provide goods and services to the older adult. Neglect, it may or may not be intentional. Things like leaving a resident on the commode for an extended period of time, forgetting to come back to them. You may have gotten busy, but you still left them there. That was neglect. May or may not have been intentional, but it's one of the things that we often sometimes see. Sometimes you can have self-neglect. Okay, so this is a resident who's refusing to bathe, to shower, just not wanting to do things. And so that, like I said, can fall under neglect. Exploitation is the means of taking advantage of the older adult. A lot of times we'll see this in the financial aspect of it. And then oftentimes if financial abuse is occurring, it is a family member that is doing that. And so misappropriations of funds, all that falls under the exploitation piece of it. All right, so shifting a little bit, the impact on the region. So like I said, there's 5 of us here at Central Pines throughout the region. So we have 7 counties here, obviously. We have 13,718 beds that we serve among the 5 of us. So we're divided up. And again, that includes nursing homes, assisted living homes, and then family care homes. So just a little breakdown of some of the work that we've done since July 1st. So we've had 431 visits to these homes. We've had 179 complaints. We've had 2,481 AGIs, and AGI is any general information. I just abbreviated it really quick for you guys on that little circle. So that's anyone that's calling our office or calling our phone line saying, hey, I need help with this. We get to count that as an AGI. So any kind of like technical assistance that we're giving people is counted there. And then we've done 37 community events. And again, that's all since July 1st of last year. So just thinking, bigger picture with the funding uncertainties that are happening at the federal level among all things right now. If our program was not in place, what would that look like? We think that there'd be a huge influx of calls that are going to the local level, to our DSS staff. There's an adult home specialist who is in place at the at DSS, who also goes in and investigates complaints and concerns. They would have a huge influx. Also, Adult Protective Services would have a big influx because we feel like our program is the boots on the ground. We're the ones that are going into the facilities, helping residents advocate. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say about that. Yep.
Perfect. I'll step in right here. As you listened to Autumn, and she was telling maybe potential if there was not an ombudsman program and why they are important. Like she mentioned, our ombudsman program is vital. They're the eyes, they're the advocates for older adults that are in the long-term care facilities. And so as we look at World Elder Abuse Awareness and what our ombudsman, elder abuse is a public health issue. And we want to make sure, even with World Elder Abuse Awareness, that it's just not a day, July 15th only, but it's something that we make sure that we keep our program funded for that. And so as she mentioned, we have 5 ombudsmen that cover our 7-county region. And so that, as she showed in the previous slide, that's about 13,718 beds across our region for 5 ombudsmen to cover. Thank you. Yes, they are busy. So there was a recommendation that was made in 1995, that was 30 years ago, that there would be 1 ombudsman for every 2,000 beds. If we look at where we are in the region right now, we are surpassed that recommendation. Each ombudsman right now, they're at 2,000, about 2,700 beds apiece, trying to cover. And so we're already below staffing level. So if we were to do that, we would probably need 6, almost 7 ombudsmen in this region just to cover the amount of beds that are here. As the gentleman talked about, the region is growing. You all know the region is growing. That means that the number of older adults in this region are also growing. We have an aging population. Aging in community is not always like at home. Sometimes there may be going to a facility. So you think about the influx of older adults who are going to need maybe have to go into a long-term care facility or adult care home. We need our ombudsman program to make sure that there are advocates and they're the eyes looking after our older adults. So if we break that down even a little bit further, as Autumn mentioned, we get funding from the Older Americans Act for our ombudsman program. It's a mixture of federal funding, and we also get some state funding. As you can see, on the federal level, we only get about $289,000 for that. And then on the state level, we get about $103,000. We're very gracious to our counties who also help assist with our agent share to help fund our ombudsman program. But within our region, I will say with what's allocated just for ombudsman, it covers 3 total ombudsman, 1 ombudsman, partial ombudsman funds, that federal and state, and a mixture of other funds. And then the 5th ombudsman is covered outside of ombudsman, looking at other funding for the program. So knowing that we already need a demand, the funding is lacking for what is needed. One of our big call to actions right now is to protect the program. It's been mentioned before, there's a lot of uncertainty at our federal level right now. And our ombudsman program is one of those programs in that uncertainty. And so we want to make sure that we protect our programming that is continued to be funded for that. So the funding definitely doesn't match what the urgency and what the need that we have right now in our region. I think Autumn also mentioned if they were not around, calls would go to APS. Also looking at in the current shift in what we're seeing in that uncertainty, there's also some threats to adult protective services. So that impacts on the local level a lot. So if we have limited funding for our ombudsman program, who are the eyes and ears that go into the facilities, and as she mentioned, sometimes APS is called, there's also a limitation in our county DSS of also helping others. Who's going to be the voice? There's going to be a crisis. There's going to be more calls that may be coming, through that local level of how to help older adults. So we want to make sure that that's our biggest call to action, is that we protect funding overall for older adults, but definitely making sure that we protect funding for our ombudsman program. So with fewer ombudsmen, that means there's less visits to the facilities. There's a longer response time for things that may be going on to those facilities, and a missed opportunity for them to intervene before something becomes a crisis. And unfortunately, we know we've all turned on the news at some unfortunate incidences that may have happened at long-term care facilities. We want to avoid those things because that is someone's home. Our older adults, that's their home. They deserve the right of dignity and to live just as we do in our community, in our own homes, and in a safe manner. And so we want to make sure that there's protection requires the presence of them, but protection also requires an investment into the program as well.
All right, so next we're going to hear briefly from Peggy, the resident that I told you about. She's going to share her experience. She does talk a little bit about COVID and what that looked like for her, but how our program assisted with her situation. Promise it worked earlier.
Turn it back up. Oh, you're not good.
We can send a link out with the testimonial.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
not a
So
problem.
Peggy talks about how she called our program during COVID. During COVID, she could not visit with her family. through Carolyn and, just the ombudsman program, we were able to make sure that she was getting some window visits. They were able to FaceTime, things like that. And then she also talks about how ongoing Carolyn is able to help her with different situations that have come up in her home and how quick Carolyn is to respond, which is great. At the end, this is where I really wanted you guys to hear this, so hopefully you'll be able to listen to it. But she talks about how she doesn't want to get anyone in trouble, okay? Because this is her home, and I think that's so important. It's just really important to remember that this is the resident's home, and we get these calls all the time about them just not wanting to get the staff in trouble because they know that they're at their beck and call. Whenever they need something, they rely on the staff to come in and help them. And so just really focusing on the abuse piece of it, because I know a lot of people, they're fearful of the retaliation. If they make a complaint, they think that, staff is going to come in there and, question them, what happened, et cetera. So it's just really important to think about that. All right, so in conclusion, next steps, what can you all do? So just being aware of the program, I think, is important. If someone calls you, if you have a family member, community member, church member comes to you and says like, hey, I'm in this situation, refer them to the ombudsman program. We may not have all the answers, but we have resources. We can put them in contact with the right people. Like I said, oftentimes people just call us whenever they're in crisis mode. So you may come in contact with someone who is, working through a situation with their parents or their loved one where they may need a long-term care home and not know where to turn. Also, so just in regards to World Elder Abuse Awareness events, each of our counties are doing something for World Elder Abuse Awareness to promote that. I know, just speaking to the counties that I serve, Wake County, they have an event June the 13th. Johnston, they have a walk late June. So just being aware of what's going on in your community. I know that those events are posted on like your county DSS websites. So if you're able, feel free to join them. They would love to have you, I'm sure. And then also just taking time to apprise yourself of the warning signs of elder abuse. Like I said, we are a mandatory reporting state. So we would just encourage you, if you think that something has happened or you've seen something happen, it's our job to go ahead and report it. All right, and the last slide, this is just our regional ombudsman team. Our picture, Charlene, we don't have her picture yet, but that is coming soon. So any questions at this time?
For you, if someone were to report elder abuse to you, who do you forward that on to for investigation?
So I would report, depending on the county, well, it would be in each of the county, but just the respective adult protective service in that county. And again, APS is housed in DSS, Department of Social Services. Oh, and we gave you guys some information. So there's a packet and there's information in here on your county DSSs.
And my last ask for you is that, feel free to contact our senators that represent our state to protect the ombudsman program and just funding for older adults in general. I say that very seriously. And I know there's some members here on the board have probably heard me last week kind of advocate for that largely. One, like I said, we have a growing population of older adults here. Even for our ombudsman program, I think all of us probably have been impacted by a family member or friend that we know that are in a long-term care facility. But just in general, humanity and just protection of, those that's their home, whether choice or not choice, but they deserve the same rights. So we want to make sure we keep the integrity of our program to advocate for them.
May I add something? It's long-term care. It's also rehab. So if people who've gone in for hip replacements or knee replacements, we deal with those people as well.
Do you ever have people report about a senior who is in her own home, but being exploited or abused in some way?
We do, yeah. And so we provide education just on, that's not our role because they are in their home. However, we'll get you to the right resource, and that also goes to adult protective services.
Yeah.
Yep, they are like the hub. They handle all. But like I said, if they're in a long-term care home, we can still be involved with it.
Where does independent living, if they're in a senior independent living that's attached to like a staged care, kind of, does that fall under living independently and on their own, so they would not go through you, or do they go through you?
Yep, so independent living goes through the Department of Insurance, actually, which is just a little bit confusing, and we don't know where that came from, but it's there. So if they had a complaint or concern about the independent living, such as like our CCRCs, that's continuing care retirement communities. If you think about like the Forest at Duke, Carroll Woods, Farrington Village, all the independent living, they would go through Department of Insurance.
And just if they're being abused in some way by that facility, if they were being
Protective
exploited by a
services.
family member, but they're living there, then that would still go through like adult protective
It would.
services.
Yep. All abuse will go through Adult Protective Services, and that's here in North Carolina. So each state is set up differently. There's some states where the ombudsman actually does investigate the abuse. It's just that's the setup here in North Carolina. Good question.
Thank you for the great work you guys do and for the presentation.
Thank you for allowing us to come.
Okay, we have some business to attend to. I'll pass it over to Lee for the presentation of the fiscal year budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everybody. I presented the budget. I'll just ask y'all to maybe advance the slides.
Okay.
So if you go to the first slide. So I presented my recommended budget at the last meeting. The public hearing was held. We had no public comments. There were a couple questions from the board, but no direction in terms of any changes that the board wanted to see to the budget. So tonight is the evening for you all to consider adoption of the budget. And just as a reminder, the budget adoption is the responsibility of the full board. So that's why it's brought to you and not the executive committee. So next slide, please. And really quickly, we have had some changes since we presented the budget to you. Those changes were summarized in the agenda item, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over the changes individually. But the net of all those changes was an additional reduction of $653,429 to the Central Pines budget. So the budget that's presented to you is balanced, and it's at $36,356,099. So next slide. So here's a summary of the budget reductions since the 23rd. Most of these are federal in nature, still not having guidance on programs that we've relied on for a number of years and needing to shift staff. Because of that, our hope is that some of these we'll find out about them, and then we'll be able to loosen things up and move staff back. We also had to reduce one of the recommended positions, which was a planner one, because of some of the changes. That position's been downgraded to a planning assistant and hours reduced to 4 days a week, or 80% rather than 5 days a week. Next slide. Some further, just another comment. The other thing that we did, I took the slash to the administration budget over a day or two, and we were able to reduce our indirect rate from 42 to 38. There was a time when I had some doubt about whether we were going to be able to do some of the employee benefit increases because of some of the changes. So we went in and we took massive hits to the admin budget. Travel for the executive and the finance staff, big reductions on some of the amenities for the facility, some other reductions that was able to get the budget down, or the admin budget down to 38%, so which freed money up in direct service programs to be able to continue to do the increases we wanted to do for our staff members. So next slide. So we also had some good news. A couple things came through that were additions. that we were actually able to move staff to because of some of the reductions. And again, we summarize those in the agenda item. Next slide.
What's the contract for with the Community Land Trust in Orange County? What is it for?
Lindsay, the Orange County Community Land Trust.
What's it for?
It's for like a site suitability study for affordable housing, and based on, and Community Land Trust, it's working with a affordable housing. I don't know what the exact name of their group is, like a task force, and they have approached us and asked us to perform that. So yeah, and I know staff from like Chapel Hill and the county have been involved too. So, but yeah, I can provide you more details too. We just started with a month ago, I believe. So yeah,
Doing some similar work for Duke University.
yeah.
So it's nice to be able to expand that work to another county.
Mm-hmm.
This is a quick summary of the new and reclassified positions. I talked about the planner one. We're also putting a hold on the engagement specialist for the new Durham Street Medicine program, not because anything bad has happened to that, but just taking on that program, we need some more time to think about what that staffing should be. So we put a hold on that staff member until we can get some additional things worked out. Next slide. So salary and benefits, nothing has changed here. We are recommending to finish up the paying class study that we started last year. So we basically implemented 80% of an individual's paying class increase with the current fiscal year. So we'll be finishing that up on July 1st. The other increase is a 3% merit increase for all employees. And this includes the recommendation for both CPRC employees, but also Triangle West MPO employees, which are included in our sort of personnel and benefit system. So merit adjustment based on how if they're eligible for merit, they would receive a 3% merit adjustment. Next slide. A couple other just highlights. We talked about this at the last meeting, but I know many of you have probably been impacted with the change in the League of Municipalities and their health benefits trust. We were too, but we're very pleased to be joining the NCHIP program that Gallagher actually administers. Several of our local governments are part of that and have been very pleased. You know, Rollsville and Aberdeen are also joining on July 1st, and we're looking forward to hopefully more stable and a little bit more control over our health insurance future. It's a self-insured sort of hybrid pool, which will give us a lot more transparency on our costs and the ability to have a lot more control over what we want to do in the future. We also had to shift our short-term disability from a paid benefit to an employee choice benefit because of a rather large increase in premiums that we were not able to absorb. Next slide. Finally, just again, I want to just real quickly talk about indirect and really emphasize that indirect is not just an extra fund. It's not something that we go and buy extravagant things. It funds the internal operations of the organization, which are critical and necessary to keep us compliant and to allow us to pay bills and payroll and all of those fun things that any business has to do. Indirect is a percentage of a program's salaries and fringe. And as you can see, we have driven our indirect rate down over the course of many years. We did have a spike upwards when we renovated the space, but we've been trying to drive that rate back down because it frees up money, obviously, for the direct programs. But we are concerned about some federal potential direction around indirect. We've already had one agency that has told us they are capping our indirect rate. And because of that, we've had to pull full-time staff off that project, and all we're going to be able to do is to hire a summer intern, which is, in my mind, not an acceptable level of staffing for a federal program, but it's the only thing we can do at this point. Next slide. And then lastly is our contingency. We are going to be replacing our finance system, which is extremely outdated. And so the finance system capital cost is going to take up most of the contingency for this year. We hope if indirect stays like it is right now, that we'll be able to recoup that cost over 5 years. But we're going to have a really tight year next year with contingency. We've been preparing our leadership team for that. But we can't continue on with the finance system we have. It's costing us more money than it's doing anything. It's awful. So we've got to replace that, and I'm pleased that we've been able to keep that in the budget. I think that's the last slide. So in your packet this evening, you have 3 pieces of paper that you would adopt as the resolution. One is so COGS don't do a budget ordinance, we do a budget resolution because we are not allowed to do ordinances. So that's why it says resolution, not an ordinance. So your budget resolution, and then the 2 paying class tables. The Central Pines employees are on 1 paying class table. The Triangle West MPO is dictated by their director and their board. We just merely take that, but this board needs to adopt that so that we can actually pay those individuals. So that one is for your concurrence, basically, but you can adopt it all in one resolution. So happy to answer any questions. Tried to go as fast as I could, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Can you remind us real quick about the services we can provide members and how that can help with the uncertainty of federal grants?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, when we're doing work for our local government members, that is very flexible dollars. It's obviously what we love doing because that's our mission. We're going to be doing the manager search for the town of Benson. So yes, the more local work we can do and doing things like, I'm going to plug it, like a regional plan for the region is really the bread and butter of an organization like ours. You know, I'd be pleased if we could replace federal money with us doing local work regionally. You know, the federal stuff we do is important, obviously has regional implications and regional importance. But if that diversity and mixture of funds changes and there's more local investment, I think that would be much better for the organization and you as local governments who you each own 1/50th of us. You continue to get your share price worth of your investment, which I argue is really good right now, but would be even better.
I would agree. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Appreciate your willingness to trim where you can in order to preserve what is priority, but also, you know, to make those necessary cuts, you know, to preserve a tough time. So especially the unknown.
And I do think I need to mention that. Thank you, ma'am. I glossed over, but it's important. This does include laying off 1 additional staff member that's funded by some federal grants that we do not know about. So we had that conversation with that staff member earlier this week. So unfortunately, there is still some laying off of filled positions within this budget. Hopefully we'll get notification from the feds that that money is going to be released and we don't have to do it. But there's no other way to fund that position right now without those dollars. So that is a filled position we'd have to lay off. But thank you, ma'am. We appreciate it.
Thank you for that, but you know.
Okay, so if no one objects, let's move this vote for the budget to the consent. So we only have to do this one time. Okay. All right, next we have the nominating committee report, and I don't believe Butch is here, so I've been written down. Okay, so Deidreana, I think you have the floor on this.
Yes, thank you. Standing in for Butch.
this evening. I'm just presenting the nominating committee report, which is in your packet, along with the memo, just sharing the slate. I know I want to give a big thanks to Beth for herding cats. That was my special request. Make sure getting us all together, the nominating committee, which included Butch, Deidreana, Kathleen, Pamela, Jennifer, Rebecca, and Ronnie. Sorry. And Ronnie. We all met and completed our deliberations to present to you this evening. With all due consideration, a nominating committee submits the following nominations for election to the respective offices. For chair, Byron McAllister. First vice chair, Susan Evans. Second vice chair, Chevelle Harmon. Thank you for stepping up. Secretary and treasurer, Chris DeShower. Thank you as well. DeShazer. And although not elected, Brett would actually serve as immediate past chair, as I have in the past. And these nominations are for you all to accept. Or you feel free to step forward. That's all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that report. Do we have anybody else who wants to make a nomination besides these?
Somebody else for chair?
Yeah, here.
The nominating committee was clear on that.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the nomination of the committees.
Thank you very much. Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
I'm sorry, that's Kirk Smith, Lee County.
Randy Haven O'Donnell, Barbara,
It
second.
would be much better to move it to consent, so we.
That's fine.
Well, we need a vote.
We have to do it separate.
Need to.
We don't have to have, but if the board is okay moving it to consent, we can do that if it's the whole slate. We typically vote on it separately, but if the board wants to expedite, then there's no dissent on that, then I think it's acceptable.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay, well, anybody object to putting this also on the consent for the vote, this slate? All right, that's great. Okay, so now on the consent, we have, is there a slide for that? Okay, so we have the recommended budget, the minutes from the April meeting, and now the nominating committee, nominated officers list. Okay, so with that, Elena, would you call the roll for the motions? Oh, sorry. Do I have a motion to approve the to vote on the consent agenda?
So moved.
All right. Let's count Ronnie for the motion and Kathleen for the second, just so we have someone from online that takes part. Okay, Elena, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Okay. As a reminder, one vote per community.
Aberdeen, Will Mulaney, aye.
Anger,
Here, Chevelle Harmon, aye.
Apex,
Brett Gant, aye.
Archer Lodge, Benson, Broadway,
Thomas Bill from Broadway, aye.
Cameron, Carborough,
Randy Haven O'Donnell, aye.
Carthage, Carey,
Jennifer Robinson, aye.
Chapel Hill, Chatham County,
Chatham County, Amanda Robertson, aye.
Clayton, City of Durham,
Adriana Freeman, City of Durham, aye.
Durham County,
Michelle Burton, Durham County, aye.
Foxfire, Fuquay Varina, Garner, Goldston, Hillsborough,
Kathleen Ferguson for Hillsborough, aye.
Holly Springs,
Krista Shazer, Holly Springs, aye.
Johnson County, Henley, Nightdale,
Thomas one, aye.
Lee County,
Kirk Smith, Lee County, aye.
Micro,
Katie Garcia, Town of Micro, aye.
Moore County, Morrisville, Orange County,
Jean Hamilton, Orange County, aye.
Pine Level, Pine Bluff.
Pine Bluff, Jerry Williams, aye.
Thank you. Apologies. Pinehurst,
Pinehurst, Jeff Morgan, aye.
Pittsboro, Princeton,
Stacy Johnson, Town of Princeton, aye.
Raleigh,
Mitchell Silver, City of Raleigh, aye.
Robbins, Rollsville,
Ronnie Kern, Rosewine.
Sanford,
Salmon, City of Sanford, aye.
Selma,
I'm McAllister, Town of Selma, aye.
Siler City, Smithfield, Southern Pines, Taylortown, Bass, Wake County,
Susan Evans, White County, aye.
Wake Forest,
Dave Slawinski, Wake Forest, aye.
Rendell, Whispering Pines,
Hutchinson, aye.
Wilson's Mills, and Zebulon. Did I miss anyone for the vote? Okay, thank you, Pamela. I saw your message.
Yes, I vote aye because I got
Perfect,
back
thank you.
on my phone. This is Pamela Baldwin. Thank you.
The vote's
Well, thank you
unanimous.
to Lee and the staff for their hard work on the budget. That's a big accomplishment, and congratulations to the new officers for next year. Okay, great. So next we have around the region, and this got skipped a couple times, and I said I have a good one for everybody, and so I hope I do. It's more of a personal one than a community one. I'm interested in hearing you guys' responses to the biggest surprise that you've experienced serving as a public official.
Oh, I'll go first.
Good or bad? Good or bad? Good or bad? Yeah.
Biggest surprise for me is the amount of time it takes to go through the grocery store. That is the absolute biggest surprise.
And my biggest surprise is that you get more objections to taking down a water tower than putting up one.
Probably that people have a lot more excitement and fervor sometimes over changing the number of minutes in a downtown parking space that they might have making comments on the entire budget.
Sounds right.
The biggest surprise is just how much folks think we have control over everything, including the airport.
You are a powerful woman.
Please don't. No, I don't.
Mine's a little longer. The biggest surprise was when we had a $25 million bond for our athletic park. And the manager had put out the request for proposals, quote, and he calls me and he goes, I knew it was inflation. And he said 83 million for a $25 million project. That was the biggest surprise.
Yeah, that's bad.
Well, actually, after 36 years in the fire service, there's no surprises.
There you go.
I would say my biggest surprise is that folks in community want things done yesterday, and it takes them a really long time to realize how slow municipal government really works.
Glacial speed.
Glacial speed.
I think maybe the biggest surprise after serving 24 years is the amount of change.
I don't know. What do I do?
Order, mayor, clerk, and 3 police officers.
Wow.
How many people do you have now?
80 staff in this budget. Plus building a $50 million complex. So it's a lot of change.
I do, I ran to, I know I used to hear if I lost, and
that had to learn about all these other things, and I enjoy all of it. So.
Here we go. In my field of view, it's the TV next. So online, we've been going around the room, but am I online have a surprise?
I am going to, this is a good surprise. This is Wilma. The Aberdeen Police Department received a North Carolina Law Enforcement Award. It's a great accreditation. It's not easy to do. There's only 8 police departments in the state that has received this award. So that was a nice surprise.
This is Katie in Chatham. No offense to you all, but one of my biggest surprises is there's no one career path to be a politician.
This is Kathleen Hillsborough. I think probably the biggest surprise was how the most contentious meeting I can recall was over the tiniest of issues in terms of the big scheme of things. And when, in terms of consequential decisions, not a soul in sight.
The theme here.
I know
Anybody else
for me,
online?
I'm constantly surprised every day with this position that I'm even invited into these rooms, and a town like Micro can rub shoulders with all of you. Makes me very proud. I know I'm not from North Carolina, so I'm one of these carpetbaggers that's changing the landscape around here, and it's been a pleasure to get to know all of you.
Anybody else online?
Well, this is Susan Evans. I just say I'm pretty much surprised every day because the things I think I'm going to get accomplished that day seem to get changed, and there's always some other fire to put out.
All right, we're back around to you.
I'm surprised at how important and extremely unimportant a duck population is at a town pond.
Yes.
I was surprised to learn that Orange County operates a morgue. You know, that
We're about to build
county.
one.
Well, I mean, if you're the county, you know, where unclaimed bodies, where do they go? The county is the one that has to, when it's a car wreck or some body found in the woods or whatever, you know, it's like the ultimate social service. I know where the bodies are buried.
That's right.
Well, they're not buried, but I know where they are.
I'm surprised about the morgue right now. I'm speechless right now.
Yeah, I know.
I was gonna say, I am surprised at how slowly things move when you're told 2050 with a straight face. The year 2050 is when something can happen with a straight face, and you're like, oh, okay.
Just take that.
I was surprised the number of people thought that this was the primary and full-time job of everyone on the board of commissioners.
And I would say mine is the talent of the staff in Apex and Central Pines as well, that you guys have thought through a lot of stuff that we're just encountering for the first time, and they're like, oh yeah, we've got to figure that out. So I've loved that.
Sure, again, if I may.
Yeah.
If I fail to mention this, I'll never be able to sleep. In Smithfield, Mayor Andy Moore, who's normally on tonight, is not on, but in Smithfield, North Carolina, a loss of a council member, quite the surprise. Marlon Lee passed away at the age of 51 on this past Sunday.
Wow.
He served the council since 2013, I believe. Tall man in stature and in action. He very much shaped a community for the entire time he was on that council. And it really came as an absolute shock to all of us. His passing was a significant loss for Smithfield for our county, for our region. Councilman Marlin.
Thank you for that. Saw that in the news. Let's go with that beauty. Any other surprises before we go and didn't speak up online? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for that, the sharing that. I think I have a lot of the similar surprises that you guys have had. Chair's report. Lee.
You're the chair.
Oh, sorry. I'm reading it. I'm not thinking sorry. Chair's report, I don't have anything. And I appreciate the opportunity to make that mistake. Okay.
At least I made it another night as director. So. Every board meeting is an opportunity for change for me. So just a couple of highlights. I appreciate what the chair said about staff, and I wanted to give some kudos to our staff for a few different things. And I think it's important for you as board members to also hear the good work that the staff's doing, because you may be asked by your managers or others, what's going on at Central Pines. So, we've talked a lot about some things that aren't as lighthearted over the last couple months, but despite that, there's still a lot of great work going on, and that's one of the things I'm most proud of from the staff is that they haven't missed a beat. There's still just outstanding work going on in a lot of different areas. Can you advance? So every staff meeting we do our core value recognitions, and so we actually have in our offices we do have an air hockey table, which was not purchased with taxpayer dollars. I will say that that was a gift from the landlord as part of this, and we've had a couple of air hockey tournaments, and we've let our hair down. But that lists our core values for the organization, which is just really important, right? It's what individuals bring to the job, and being in public service. I think for a lot of folks, they feel like it's calling, and they believe it's very important. So we recognize staff members. They're nominated by a supervisor or somebody else. Yes, sir.
I'm irritated by the blue. What NHL team is that?
Blue. I will tell you, Commissioner Smith. I wanted to get the Hurricanes table, but it was double the price.
Oh.
So I went for the generic version. But since you mentioned that, go Canes. Yeah, right.
Canes tonight.
Yes.
If it's Carolina blue, that's not bad.
Well,
I like that.
I can go for that. Yeah,
You're
I can go for that. So they do have a club hockey team, ice hockey team. All right, if we'll advance. So Amanda works on our AAA team, and she, the AAA assistant director, called her out for really excellent customer service, hosting matter of balance training for staff, and she was very engaging and organized and prepared. And so we do this at staff meeting with 40, 50 people in the room, so folks don't know it's coming, so it's a nice little surprise. So next one was, again, it was a AAA sort of themed staff meeting. Jasmine and Jennifer are both with our AAA, and we're recognized for some of the monitoring. So we monitor funds as part of the role at the AAA, Older American Act dollars. And so both of them were doing fabulous work, and we really approach the monitoring. And this is what I'm also very proud of. It's not we don't want to get anybody, right? We want people to be successful. So really a mantra of our staff is, we're going to hold people accountable, but we're also looking for success. And so it's that customer service and making sure that we want to see successful monitorings, and we'll do what we need to do to help folks get there. Next one. Ashley's our AAA assistant director, and another one for Jennifer. This came from our AAA director, Janisha, just again around the monitoring and how much she appreciates that. Monitoring for our staff is a stressful time because there's a lot to do, and a lot of can be stressful, right, for providers that are getting monitored, right, by the big regional council, and we try to make it a good experience, but at the same time make sure federal and state money are being spent appropriately. Next one. And we also, we really, I'm really happy, you know, although Triangle West MPO is a separate entity, we make sure they're included in our staff meetings. And so Eve is a part of the Triangle West team and was recognized by a member of the CPRC team for doing some translation services. So we appreciate Eve's work on that. So that's the last core value. I do have a couple other things. I wanted to read something that I actually got today. And I'm really proud that we provide a lot of technical assistance to our governments, but also to other regional councils. And so we were asked about 5 months ago to go to the Albemarle Commission, which is on the coast, and assist them with their finances. They had lost a finance director, lost an executive director, and we're really needing a lot of help. So our CFO, Hope, and our finance manager, Katie Davis, met with them, actually went down to Albemarle for a couple days, and I got this letter today from their board chair and from the interim director, and it was addressed to the board and to me. But on behalf of the Albemarle Commission Board of Delegates, I'd like to extend our heartfelt thanks to you and your team for generously providing support and expertise in the recent staff transition. Contributions were instrumental in helping us equip our team members with the confidence they see. The professionalism, insight, and enthusiasm Hope, Katie, and the entire finance team made a lasting impression. Our staff have shared overwhelmingly positive feedback, noting how valuable the training was to them. We're extremely pleased with the results of our audit. They were behind on getting their audit together, so they were able to get their audit completed. Quite honestly, it exceeded our best expectations. This would not have been possible without you and your support. We're truly grateful for your partnership. We hope to continue working together in the future and are always happy to reciprocate support should the opportunity arise. Thank you once again for your time, effort, and dedication. And that was from Robert Kirby, their board chair, and David Whitmer, who's their interim executive director. Yes.
I know values all the staff doing a great job, but I think you missed somebody, and that's you. And I can remember, and really, I think the big difference I see back in the olden days, we would come from these meetings and promote Triangle back then to our towns, but that's not happening today. I mean, when I meet with my town manager there, he's talking about the COG. He's talking about the things they work with the COG. It's a big difference than it was years ago. And I know Jennifer was chair when we hired you, and I think it's been a tremendous difference. Most of you don't remember, priorly. A lot of you don't. If I look around the room, I think it's Jennifer and myself.
So long ago. Was that Miss Baldwin? Yeah. Son. Yeah.
Oh, I remember pre-Lee.
Time before Lee. And it was a good COG, but Lee has really changed the whole complexion of it. How long you been on staff?
10 years.
10 years. Wow. But I really think, and I know you're stepping down his chair and you coming in on his chair, but really Lee needs to be recognized along with the rest of the staff. Tremendous amount of not only work, but actually the leadership and the change the COG has gone through. Mm-hmm. And what you describe in that letter of helping the membership, sure. So I really think it's a big thing.
Amen.
The team is just awesome. The leadership team we have and the staff, I put up against anybody, and it takes a lot of dedicated individuals. So, but thank you for that comments. It's very kind of you. And the support of the board has been, because some of the board chairs know that it got difficult for a while and it was frustrating, but the board support has been just outstanding, and the staff loves it when they hear from you and they know that you all recognize what they're doing, and you ask them to come to their communities. They love that. So thank you for getting them involved in what you're doing. So I appreciate it very much. And I have two other things.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, on our staff, kudos to our grant writing team. We continue, even in times where grants are sort of shifting a little bit, to have grant opportunities and get grant local government members. So we just found out about 2 additional ones from the state. For Chatham County, we wrote a grant, and Chatham's receiving $350,000 for energy assessments in 10 county facilities and retrofits in 2 of those buildings. This is state money coming in. So thank you to our grants team for writing that grant. And then also for Orange County, $196,000 grant, which I believe will install solar at the Cedar Grove Community Center. So our staff helped write that one as well. So thank you. We continue to have a lot of success with grant. Logo. So we have the Local Government Career Expo coming up very soon. This is another cool thing that we partner with a lot of the local governments on. It's June the 7th, Saturday. Last year's event drew 3,000 people to the McKimmon Center. This year, we're partnering with our friends in Nash County and Rocky Mount. So there will actually be 2 events on the 7th. One at the Friday Center in Chapel Hill, and one in Rocky Mount. And really, it's all about local governments coming together and promoting the value of local government work. It's not, this job for Wake County or this job for Whispering Pines, but obviously they're there and they can promote their jobs. So it's really about the value of public service and getting people interested in jobs based on their career goals. I'm an engineer. I want to do something of public service. I'm interested in public safety. All the different types of jobs that you can do. So if you don't see your name, your jurisdiction on the back, it means that you're not signed up yet. We can still take jurisdictions through Friday. Friday. So and we promoted this through staff, and there's some local governments that have really legitimate reasons why they can't participate. We know about those, but if somebody happens to not know about it, because that happens sometimes, they can get up with Elena or Beth, and thank you.
Are you okay with us promoting this in our own personal?
Absolutely.
Yes. Please spread the word.
That's the other thing. We want people to come. So yeah, promoting it and asking people to come.
Excuse me, Lee,
Yeah.
do you have a list of types of jobs? Like, let's say I'm a data scientist, should I come? Or is it?
So we did a very rudimentary mapping, and basically we can claim that every category that the Labor Bureau or Bureau of Labor Statistics says is in the economy is in local government. So if you want to find a job in your field, one of our agencies will have it. That's our we did a rough mapping. So yeah. Thank you. Good.
Go Canes.
Okay, is there any other business for tonight? All right, call us adjourned. Thank you very much.
Well, I would
Yes.
just in what you said, just thanking you for your service.
Thanks.
Just acknowledging. Presentation, but just for tonight.
It's been a big honor, and I've learned a lot more about the organization in doing this, and it's just amazing the regional perspective we have that I think is unique to the organization and really vibrant for our area. So yeah, thank you for saying that. Okay, anybody else? Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Congrats again.
Yeah.